Welcome to the School of Wisdom, a weekly podcast produced for the Bible Bistro, studying the book of Proverbs chapter by chapter. My son, hear the instruction of your father. Forsake not the law of your mother, for they shall be an ornament of grace to your head, and chains about your neck. Now, this week's lesson. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the School of Wisdom podcast here in the Bible Bistro. So glad you're with me today. Well, we got a good one today. Proverbs chapter 18 is our subject today. We're going to look at verses 1 through 24. I think it's just 24 verses here. I only have 3 divisions here in this particular chapter. And by the way, if you want the outline, you can go to my-dailydose.com. Go there, click on the blog button, and then just look for a title in the blog list that says Outline for Proverbs, and then you just select the chapter. For this one, you would find the one that says Outline for Proverbs 18. You find that and click on it, and then you'll have Proverbs chapter 18 outline. You can download it, you can use it online, however you want to do it. And you don't have to use it with this particular podcast either. You can just download those for free. That's for you. I just make those available for you. So today, this outline comes via my professor, Dr. Marvin Tate, and his outline for this chapter. I'm going to piggyback on what he taught about this chapter. So I have his outline for us, and I have that marked at the top of the sheet. It is taken from Dr. Tate's outline that he teaches in the Broadman Bible Commentary. So if you want to go there, get that, and take a look at it. That'd be great. I have 3 separate sections here in chapter 18. The first section is called Foolish Ways. Second section on avoiding destruction. And the third section, Teaching and Precepts. Now, teaching and precepts is kind of like a hodgepodge. It's a potpourri of things. And we'll see those as we get to that third section. So let's look at, first of all, foolish ways. Now I'm going to read for you verses 1 through 8. Through desire a man having separated himself seeketh and intermeddleth with all wisdom. A fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself. When the wicked cometh, then cometh also contempt, and with ignominy reproach. The words of a man's mouth are as deep waters, and the wellspring of wisdom as a flowing brook. It is not good to accept the person of the wicked, to overthrow the righteous in judgment. A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calls for strokes. A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost part of the belly. So that's verses 1 through 8, Proverbs chapter 18, foolish ways. And you'll notice as you look through here, the fool is highlighted several times. I've got him at least 3 times here. And some of these others we can assume are fools. The talebearer, for example, the wicked, so forth, that he's mentioned twice. So the fool dominates the passage. We begin in verse 1, through desire a man having separated himself seeketh and intermeddleth with all wisdom. Now, this is a very difficult verse to translate. In the Hebrew, there are only 6 Hebrew words, 2 prepositions. And so 6 words, 2 prepositions for this particular verse, but yet it's very difficult to translate. So I think what we have here is we have a hidden idiom that we just don't understand. Because you can either translate it positively, that is, a man through desire separates himself so that he can mingle himself with wisdom or knowledge or prudence or however you want to translate that particular word. But then there's the darker side of it, which says, through selfishness, a man will separate himself and then contend with the decisions of other men. So if you look at your translations, because everybody's translation is going to be different, the RSV, the NIV, the NASB, all of those are going to have a little bit something different in each one for verse 1. So, you have 12 translations, you're going to have 13 different ways to look at this. I've actually translated it for myself, and I'm not sure where I come down on it. It's, like I said, it's a very difficult verse to kind of get your hands on. So you can take it either way. And you can take it either way because the historical translation of this is in so many different ways. You know, you can take it positively, that if you have a desire to learn something, well, separating yourself to go after that thing and seeking it with all your heart and engaging with all the knowledge that is there available to you, well, that's a good thing. Then, of course, you could take it bad and say that, you know, there's a man who separates himself. That is, he excludes himself or he estranges himself from society. And then because of that, he attacks and comes at all the wisdom that he sees in other people. So, you know, it can be either good or bad. It is in this list of foolish things, and there's really not a whole lot of good stuff here in these first 8 verses. So you can take it how you want. A fool has no delight in understanding, verse 2. A fool's lips enter into contention, verse 6. A fool's mouth is his destruction, verse 7. Notice that we have in verses 6 and 7 the fool's mouth mentioned 4 different times. So 2 verses, we have it 4 different times. We have the fool's lips in the first part of verse 6. In the second part of verse 6, we have his mouth. It calls for strokes. In verse 7, we have a fool's mouth, not his lips. It calls for his destruction. But his lips, in the second half of the verse, are the snare of his soul. So we have lips, mouth, mouth, lips. Beautiful little chiastic structure here that the proverb writer Solomon is using to let us see very clearly that the fool, he's going to have contention, strokes, destruction, and a snare. And it's because of the way he speaks. Now, we're not, at this point, because we're in chapter 18, we're not unaccustomed to talking about the mouth and the way the mouth works and the importance of what we say and how we say. So when we come to 6 and 7, we would kind of want to just pass over it, but I don't think we should, because this mouth and these lips of a fool have some very definite things that we need to pay attention to. Remember last week I mentioned chapter 17 that the most horrible statement about the fool, this is Dr. Tate's contention, the most horrible statement about the fool is found there in 17 when it says, "Let a man meet a bear robbed of her cubs rather than a fool in his folly." So, you know, foolishness is dangerous, and we might want to put like a warning buoy around 6 and 7. Be careful when you enter these waters, because a fool's lips, the fool's mouth, it's not a good place to be. And we know people like that. The words of a talebearer, that's another fool, they're like wounds. Some of your translations are going to say they're like delicious morsels or dainties that go down into the belly, and what they do in the belly is not good, because if they're dainties, the words of a talebearer are dainties. And then you know how that works, because you hear somebody telling something about somebody else and you think it's some piece of information that no one else has, you drink it up. Well, once it goes in, it acts like a wound. It goes deeper and deeper. It cankers and gets worse and worse. These words are not good words either. So again, more about words here. Verse 4 is an antidote to all of this. The words of a man's mouth are as deep waters, and the wellspring of wisdom a flowing brook. Well, we'd rather have a wellspring of wisdom, wouldn't we, than delicious morsels given to us by a talebearer. So let's drink from the wellspring of wisdom. And that comes through the mouth of the wise man. So there we want to find wisdom rather than wounds. Those two should be contrasted. Verse 8 and verse 4 should be contrasted. One is good and one is not. So these are foolish ways. Now the second division here, on avoiding destruction. Again, this is Dr. Tate's outline heading. Let me read for you verses 9 through 15. He also that is slothful in his work is brother to him that is a great waster. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe. The rich man's wealth is his strong city, and as an high wall in his own conceit. Before destruction the heart of man is haughty, and before honor is humility. He that answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame unto him. The spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear? The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. Verses 9 through 15 on avoiding destruction. Notice that we begin with the slothful. This kind of connects us back to the first 8 verses, doesn't it? Foolish ways is also found here in verse 9. Slothful in his work is a great waster. Here's where we find destruction. Brother to him that is a great waster. How is it that a man that's slothful is related to a man who's a waster? It's because they're both lazy. A man who's slothful in his work is lazy. A man who is a great waster is lazy because he doesn't want to try to arrange and organize and preserve that which he has created. So he wastes. So both of them are lazy. They are brothers. They come from a similar background. Then we have protection from destruction. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe. So if you want protection from destruction, there's one place to go. Of course, there's always just one place to go, and that is to the Lord. The rich man's wealth is his strong city, and is an high wall in his own conceit. Now notice how that comes right after verse 10. If the name of the Lord is a strong tower and the righteous run into it, then it tells us that the rich man runs to his wealth. Well, how come the rich man can't run to the name of the Lord too? Well, he can, but the rich man, because he's rich, depends on his riches. He thinks that's going to protect him. And notice, verse 11 tells us very clearly, wealth is not a protection in time of trouble. It's an high wall in his own conceit. So he thinks that he's got this wall around him that is protecting him from trouble, but he doesn't. It's only there in his mind, in his own imagination. It's conceited to think that he's protected in his wealth, because wealth is going to take wings. We're going to hear Solomon tell us that. Wealth is going to take wings like a bird and fly away. So the rich man is going to find himself naked and before trouble. Before destruction, the heart of man is haughty. Before honor is humility. Of course, we've seen this before, right? That is, destruction comes, or pride comes before destruction. That's the verse. And here, destruction, the heart, before destruction, the heart is haughty. That's the same thing. Pride comes before destruction. Haughtiness being pride. Before honor is humility. So if you want honor, you need to humble yourself. Well, who am I going to humble myself before? You humble yourself before the Lord. He's the one who brings honor. He raises up and he puts down. He that answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame unto him. The spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear? So here we have, he that answers a matter before he hears it. We go back to the whole pride issue. If you think you know it before you've even heard the matter, shameful. It's just shameful. It's foolishness, folly, and shame. The spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit, that is a broken spirit, who can bear that? You can't. A broken spirit is a very difficult thing to deal with. It's very difficult to help someone who has a broken spirit, because usually when there's a broken spirit, the individual has given up. The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. So here we end on a good note, where the righteous runs into the name of the Lord, and the prudent is getting knowledge. At the same time, the slothful man and his brother are wasting their time away. Now we come to the third outline point here in Dr. Tate's outline, teaching and precepts. This, as I said, is kind of a hodgepodge. It's a potpourri of things, verses 16 through 24. And you'll just see they're very difficult to try to relate to one another. So we just have sort of someone sprinkled some of that non-cake powder in here to separate them and keep them from one another, because they're just different. These are just, individual proverbs that have been grouped together here at the end of 18. A man's gift makes room for him and bringeth him before great men. That's the first one there in 60. I just want to make a mention of that. I'm going to go through these one by one, so that's how I'm going to read this particular section. This particular verse, 16, I know a fella who has his call of ministry based on this verse. His call to ministry is based on the fact that a man's gift makes room for him, and he is a very gifted man. And so when the Lord told him this, he knew because he had a gift, and it was obvious to him and to everyone else that he had that gift. He took that and he used it for the Lord. And so this is sort of the verse that has propelled him into a life of ministry. Verse 17, he that is first in his own cause seemeth just, but his neighbor cometh and searcheth him out. You know, it's a thing amongst writers to say that every man or every woman's mother loves what they write. And that's true. And we, as writers, love what we write, especially the first go-through. We usually look at it and say, oh, that's pretty good, until we set it aside for 24 hours and come back to it. We think, woo, this is no good at all. So everyone thinks, yep, I'm right here, I got this right, I'm just in this decision. And then someone else comes along and examines it, your neighbor, whoever that might be, and they look at it and say, what a piece of garbage this is. You need to work on this. You need to fix this. Thank God for the neighbor who comes and searches me out. That's a good thing. So here we have the neighbor who comes and corrects what the person cannot see. So it's very, very good verse, very good proverb here. Something that we see in our lives a lot. Verse 18, the lot causes contentions to cease and parts between the mighty. Remember, the lot was cast into the lap. It was a way of making a decision, and Israel believed in the total providence of God over all things, and so they thought if they needed to make a decision, they didn't know which way to go, they cast the lot, and the lot would show them. They weren't trying to depend on chance, and they had not made chance their God. What they were doing was allowing the Lord to point through the lot to the decision that he wanted them to make. This was how the land was divided, was by lot. And so they knew the Lord's hand was in it. Here it says it causes contentions to cease because once the lot spoke, they knew the Lord had spoken, that was the way they were to go. Verse 19, a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle. It's so true. I don't think I need to make any comment about that. We all understand how difficult it is to win our brother back. A man's belly shall be satisfied with the fruit of his mouth, and with the increase of his lips shall he be filled. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. So here we have two that kind of fit together. They're both talking about the mouth. Go back and compare these two with verses 6 and 7. The fool's lips enter into contention. His mouth calls for strokes. His mouth is destruction. Lips are a snare to his soul. Here it says a man's lips will fill his belly. A man's belly should be satisfied with the fruit of his mouth. So the fruit of the mouth, that is what he says. The increase of his lips, he shall be filled. So this is not the foolish man speaking, is it? No, this is a man of profit. This is a man who's doing and speaking the words of the Lord in wisdom. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Again, notice every single chapter we've had these words, death and life. Now, the charismatic movement in America in the last 30, 40 years has taken this verse and they've corrupted it because they've tried to say that you can speak into existence things, just like God does. That's foolishness. We are not God. We are His instruments and His creation, but we are not Him. There is no power in our mouth to speak life out of nothingness. So death and life are in the power of the tongue refers back to 20, which refers back to, in contrast, 6 and 7. We are speaking death and life in a sense by speaking either wisdom or foolishness. So what's your mouth filled with? Is your mouth filled with hatred and anger? Well, if it's filled with hatred and anger and foolishness and shameful things, then you're inviting death. If it's filled with wisdom and knowledge and prudence and so forth, then you're inviting life. And remember, we've had this theme of death and life. This didn't just show up here in 18. If you're really going to teach this verse, you need to teach this verse as it stands upon all the other proverbs that have spoken about death and life. Let's be very diligent in the way we teach the Bible. Verse 22, whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor of the Lord. My wife will say amen to that. I love that verse because I did find a good wife, and I know I found a good thing. The poor uses entreaties, but the rich answers roughly. Boy, this is a statement of fact, isn't it? And then verse 24, a man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. This verse, 24, has been used by the church over many years to say that this last phrase, there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother, refers to the person of the Lord Jesus. So he is the friend that sticks closer than a brother. That first piece there, a man that has friends must show himself friendly. Let the mind of Christ reign in you. If you have a friend that sticks closer than a brother, and that is the Lord Jesus, then allow the mind of Christ to manifest itself in you and be a friend like he's a friend. Join me again next week. We're going to look at Proverbs chapter 19. We start off in chapter 19 with a better is statement. So I hope you'll join me then on the School of Wisdom podcast. Hey, thanks for listening to the School of Wisdom podcast. If you're listening to this over YouTube, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so that you'll be notified every time one of these podcasts is uploaded. I really appreciate all my followers, and I try to respond to each and every one of your questions. Come again next week, and we'll enjoy another lesson in the School of Wisdom.